Hello everyone, greetings from the 7th of Nero, AJ here, with a continuation of a more detailed look at the armies that make up the factions in War Machine and Hordes. What's easy to forget about Cryx is that they don't really have an army per se, and certainly not an army in any conventional sense. Just a massive navy with a preponderance of marines, marine-like units, and what can be interpreted to be a random collection of necromancers' concoctions, experiments, and/or playthings. Consequently, it is little surprise that military production is focused almost solely on helljack production, and not any equipment given how such vagaries are wasted on thralls, and application of necromancy on that front more than suffices for the most part. Expendability and recyclability make an additional investment in such forces rather unnecessary. Meanwhile, the pirates do what pirates do best: take what they can and give nothing back. More than any other power to be contended with in the Iron Kingdoms, the forces of the Nightmare Empire of Cryx strike an irksome balance between the living and the not-so-living. There is no shortage of opportunity to fight for the Cryxians, willingly or not. Pirates who serve in life are often brought back to serve in death as a thrall, or perhaps as part of the Ghost Fleet, whose numbers are one of the most unpredictable things. Few undead servitors among the ranks of the Nightmare Empire's warriors have a will to call their own, possessing only basic motivations as permitted to them by the necromantic rites that brought animation back to their corpses. Consequently, it would be wrong to say that ruthlessness is a necessary quality to live on that accursed archipelago. Rather, it is necessary to merely exist as an independently thinking entity. Backstabbing and political one-upmanship is a matter of course among the pirates, as well as opportunism in a very might-makes-right way of life. However, while this is true of the living pirates, the dead pirates are like a painting meticulously, repeatedly, and continuously copied. Its every feature is held in time, but little details here and there change. The undead captains and admirals stand in the foreground, known by all and unchanging, but the nameless and mindless deck swappers stand far in the distance, faces blurred, their copies adopting new and varying features as they are felled in battle to be replaced by the freshly killed. And yet, the undead lords of Cryx are just as prone to the factionalism that affects the multitude crews of the Nightmare Empire's fleets. The Lich Lords, most of whom are ancient by any reckoning, have little affection for each other, with perhaps very few exceptions, and respect each other's domains more out of fear of their master, Toruk the Dragonfather, than anything else. Even so, it is easy to disconnect the nature of the Lich Lords as we know them now from their ultimate origins as the pirate kings of the Cryxian archipelago. Among the living are the majority of the, perhaps perversely, permanent, for a given definition of the word, forces of the Nightmare Empire of Cryx, which take their form in the largest fleets of Imoran, pirate or otherwise. The only thing that stops them from dominating the seas of Western Imoran is their inability to cooperate with each other for any extended amount of time. They are pirates, after all. It also means that any attempt to attack Skell or one of the other fortified berths for the fleets is doomed to failure, as the ships of Signar, Ord, the Protectorate and Cador would be swarmed by the pirate captains who know the currents of the Shard Islands like no other, and have no means to contend with the magic that guides the black ships. But for all the Cryxian predilection towards selfishness, they are not completely without organisation, though. Even so, it would be a charitable thing to say that the hundreds of ships the Dragonfather can call upon are organised into 4 fleets, 3 of the living and 1 of the undead. The fleets of the living seem like ad hoc assemblies of ships with the barest of theme or pattern. The core of them are the flagships of the Black Fleet, a minimum of 6 black ships, built from the blight-tainted timbers of trees that grow along the Scales Flow River, and their designs stolen from the Orgoth for use by the Cryxians upon the Western invaders' defeat. One of many boons, shall we say, the Orgoth left for the realm of the necromancers. The fleet of the undead, however, is an ancient collection of demonic ships, the Ghost Fleet, which is very small by any estimation. Though smaller than each of its counterparts among the living fleets, with barely 20 ships, and its flag raised on the Atramantis, the Ghost Fleet operates independently for the most part, owing to the long service of its commanders. Interestingly, though a fleet, even if it constitutes little more than a strong flotilla, it is led on the waves by a captain. But Rengrave is much more than a mere captain. Like only very few others, he is as old as the Nightmare Empire itself, for the Atramantis was the flagship of the only pirate king, Threnodax, who brazenly declared open defiance of the Dragonfather. It was to Rengrave and his crew that Toruk first offered servitude, even if there was little choice in the matter. And upon their acceptance of it, the Dragonfather conflagrated the Atramantis and a handful of other ships, transforming their crews into revenants. Then, furious at Threnodax's audacity, Toruk dispatched the first Cryxian vassal as a demonstration of power and utterly destroyed the rebel king and his forces, annihilating them and visiting eternal torment on the rebellious pirate king's soul. In the aftermath, Rengrave, and with him his first mate Castle Blackbane, took on a special role within the Nightmare Empire's fleets beyond the reproach of all but the Lich Lords. Rengrave would go on to be the Dragonfather's longest-serving captain at sea, alongside the captains of the four cinder ships, which invariably follow in the Atramantis' wake. Captains Wineblood of the Bloated Bilge, Galloway of the Blunder, Magrot of the Dirge, and Farwain of the Death Knell. Their collective ghostly appearance on the horizon, and distant wailing dirge which marks their arrival, bring as much fear to any Emery sailor as any of the black ships, for the means of fighting against them are often not available to a normal crewman aboard a human ship, pressed by unscrupulous dock gangs. Such is Rengrave's position, even though he is nominally subservient to Queen Scar Ravenbane, the High Admiral of Cryx's navy. She tacitly acknowledges his almost complete independence. While Scar does claim command over the four fleets, she also personally takes the helm at the head of the Black Fleet, perhaps the most powerful assembly of naval force in Amoran. As a Satyxis, one might be inclined to believe that Scar leads her fellow Satyxis almost exclusively. However, such is her position, she must also command the various groups of Black Ogryn, Blighted Cholkin, and Shard humans in addition. Instead, command of the Satyxis is delegated to her second-in-command, Admiral Axiara Wraithblade, who leads the Satyxis Raider Flotilla, part of the larger pirate rabble which accounts for the vast majority of Cryx's many semi-independent or lesser pirate commanders, who also answer to Axiara. The Satyxis have a violent history, as perhaps the youngest race on Amoran. Once human, they were mutated by the brain of blood caused when Toruk slew one of his wayward offspring, Shazx, the White Dragon, over the islands that formed Satyx. The blight turned the men of Satyx into lifeless husks and transformed the women into the now familiar form of the Satyxis that plague western Amoran coasts today. They maintained their traditions of blood magic, but became even more sadistic in the aftermath, raiding settlements for plunder, under orders, or sometimes even out of personal lust and revenge, none of which need be mutually exclusive. Though the human pirates ostensibly support the Satyxis and Axiara's raiders as part of this second fleet, they are often left to their own devices unless the plans of a Lich Lord are disseminated and compel their subordination in a more coordinated fashion. The Shard pirates, who comprise the largest proportion of Cryx's living human forces, are a rowdy collection of unruly carrion feeders, even if they are not without strength of their own. The Dirge Seers, at least to those for whom they sell their services, are a useful asset for captains in gaining the edge over enemies, whether from the Bacarian League or their fellow Shard. The third and last of Cryx's fleets of the living is the Slaughter Fleet, under Admiral Corgal the Blacktooth. In reality, the Slaughter Fleet is commanded by the fleet's marine contingent, General Gerlach Slaughterborn, as the ships that comprise this fleet are primarily massive transport ships for the Nightmare Empire's living muscle, often being first ashore in amphibious assaults. The Satyxis also conduct raids, but for them, speed is the defining feature, distinguishing their light, small and sleek ships from the hulking galleons of the Slaughter Fleet. As such, the Satyxis dhoze, as they are known, need not take on much by way of supplies, for their forays into the mainland are always brief, while the Slaughter Fleet plans for occupation and more long-term goals for their attacks against the western coast of Amoran. With the Satyxis and humans coming under Axiara's command, Corgal and Gerlach lead Cryx's Black Ogryn and Blighted Trollkin in large part, though the occasional Bogryn is able to make themselves known among them. Despite being native to the mainland, tribes of Ogryn and Trollkin eventually migrated to the Isles long before the coming of the Dragonfather, many fleeing Menite persecution in the aftermath of the Priest King's purges. After the foundation of the Nightmare Empire, proximity to Toruk's physical presence would lead them to be bloodthirsty almost beyond mortal comprehension. As a people who delighted in blood rituals, it is thought this was the cause of the blight affecting the Trollkin much more so than the Ogryn, whose bodies appear natural, even while their psyches devolve towards gleeful brutality. In any event, the Blighted Trollkin and Black Ogryn of the archipelago are matched only by each other in their savagery and desire to commit untold atrocity on the enemies, or rather, in their terms, the victims of Cryx. While the Trollkin and Ogryn form the living muscle, as it were, the undead version of this are the, admittedly poorly understood, Banes. Though I will not admit to picking the brains of a necromancer, however figuratively or literally, my knowledge of the nature of Banes is apparently little worse than those who fight alongside, or even command them. Perhaps most irksome of all about the Banes is their possession of souls, but these are not the souls of such living creatures as you or I. They are souls unwillingly stripped of every familiar feature of what made it a soul within a being worth protecting by the gods. What remains is a sentience with nothing but malice and violence, reflecting its origins from the void, a harsh and unforgiving emptiness between dimensions. They are ill-fortuned wandering souls of the dead in Urkane who have no sanctuary, who persist in the barren wilderness of that realm, only to be dragged below into the vacuum of an abyss which leaves them with little but the barest shadow of what once was. Banes indeed possess souls, but in name only, and they are dragged into existence by powerful necromancers who know the fell rites necessary to summon them to Kane from the void. And upon their arrival to the realm of the living, they forever carry with them the stench of death and a chill wind that freezes the souls of the living. While Banes can think independently, if they are so inclined, they are nonetheless single-minded in their desire for slaughter and destruction, and form a blunt instrument in war, to hammer down the resistance of any living host, since their Cryxian masters know they can always bring them back. One such individual is Bane Lord Tartarus, a Bane himself who is powerful enough to be able to summon his fellows amidst the heat of battle, thanks to the near-limitless hatred he acquired over the thousands of years spent when his soul was cast down by the priest king Gollivant, for in life he was Horfar Grimir, among the greatest and most accursed of Trollkin chieftains among the Mulga. Less ethereal than the Banes, and rather more conventional, as far as necromancy is concerned at least, are the legions of thralls raised to be thrown at whatever obstacle lay before Cryxian sorcerers. War suits these crazed individuals, for the recycled dead are their business after all. There is no tradition to this per se, or history of note other than it is, quite simply, how it is described. Methods have been refined over the years to control and lend utility to the thralls which necromancers raise, but there is little to comment on beyond that. In the early years of necromancy, thralls were a simple creation, incapable of anything except mindless action and uncontrolled aggression. But today, the runes used during the rituals can reach a level of complexity, so as to provide thralls with the means to communicate with both its peers and its summoners, the intellect to interpret relatively difficult commands, and the dexterity to use simple weapons. Some thralls are even raised with the intelligence to command. Others are cobbled together with other creatures, necrotide-burning machinery, mechanica, and surplus flesh for horrifying results. These soul hunters are the brainchild of especially insane necrosurgeons inspired by the natterings of necrotex and their own incomprehensible musings. Or so I have been led to believe. Special mention should go to a particularly nihilistic sort of necromancer and their creations, the pistol wraiths. It takes a great deal of willpower for a soul to remain wandering Kane after a body's death, and for those as driven as elite duelists who prize their abilities more than any living being the skills of their trade, restlessness of the soul is troublingly common. Some linger among the living, aggrieved at an unjust defeat, or still yearning for a duel that would have given their lives meaning. Thus, another dirge for Lael, for while they may be free of Khadoran and Sulmenite overlords, Cryxian gravediggers remain a constant menace as necromancers seek to defile those duelists who manage to find rest in death. Fortunately for the living of Imoran, the Cryxians have remained quiet since the claiming. But unfortunately for same-said people, we do not know what the land of the undead has planned in that time. And if the past millennia have taught us anything, it is nothing good which emerges from that place.